Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm Peter Lavelle. Well, you've all been waiting for it. It's thumbs up, thumbs down. That time of the week here, and I have Ciara and I have George here. So I'm going to flip a metaphorical coin. Ciara, what's your thumbs up?
Well, I wanted to stray away from the US since it's been the focus of everyone's thoughts and news feeds for the last week, if not month. And I wanted to actually talk about something probably you have an opinion on, Peter, because you lived there for quite some time, the anti-abortion laws that came in Poland. And I'm going to give it a thumbs down because it's caused this mass wave of protests that we haven't seen the likes of since the fall of communism. Biggest numbers of people coming out into the streets in Warsaw, in other cities and towns to protest these anti-abortion laws. And also interesting to note that these laws, they come on the heels of the US push for allies to follow its lead in anti-abortion and its stance on anti-abortion. And you have countries that are like, we've got Egypt, Hungary, also who have followed the US, and they've signed the Geneva Consensus Declaration and the Anti-Abortion Declaration it's in light of promoting women's health and strengthening the family. Although it has to be said, in my opinion, I think that as a woman myself, abortion should be an option, and it should be something that women have access to within their own country in a safe and clean environment, legally being able to do what they need to do.
I am definitely against abortion, but I'm not. I don't go as far as to say that I think I have the right to say to another woman that you don't have a right to do that. And I think that that's the difficulty of this question here. I do believe in individual freedom and choice here. But when I hear a story about what's going on in Poland, what really bothers me is something I told my Polish friends when I lived there when they entered the EU, is that you're not just getting into a trading bloc. You're getting into an ideological bloc as well. And I can tell you that Poland and Poland is one of the pariahs along with Hungary, is that they're pushing back. I mean, we want to be rich. We don't want your values, okay? We want to have commerce with you, okay? And we see the advantages of it. Poland now is far more richer than it ever was, okay? I mean, it has its problems, but when I lived there, it was rock bottom. Okay, but the European Union is also a values issue. Okay, and so a lot of Poles, you have to understand that a lot of traditional values is what got Poland through communism. Okay, it was the church. Okay, and interestingly enough, agriculture was not turned into state farms. Okay, it was left primarily alone, and the church, only for a short number of years under Wyszynski, after the Second World War, did the church have a lot of prosecution. After that, after '56, it was an uneasy balance. But neither the church was going to push the state, and the states realized you don't push the church around. Okay, and now at the end of communism, there was such high expectations, and post-modernism is very nihilistic. It doesn't really talk about, as a matter of fact, it looks down upon traditional values. And I think a lot of Polish people, it's their literature, it's their history, and there's a sense of self. And the European Union, so, no, that's we're done with that. Okay, we're done with that. Okay.
Peter, well, I would like to add in comparison that, for example, I do know that and understand that Poland is like a very deeply rooted Roman Catholic country, as was Ireland once upon a time.
Yeah. Okay. If I could interject from your interjection, I'm focused. I'm not talking about a high level of religiosity. I think that's something that people misunderstand about Poland. It's a social identity. It's an identity to root themselves in community. I'm not saying that there's a high level of religiosity. As a matter of fact, a lot of research has shown that it isn't very, very high. Okay, it's an identity. It's not necessarily a value in that sense. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I just in terms of then turning away from the church in recent decades. Ireland, we've had this struggle for abortion. It was only made legal in 2018. The referendum was passed in May, and now Poland is pushing back, and women are pushing back against the recent proposal to make abortion illegal, apart from in extreme cases where you have rape or incest. And what I want to just point out is that, even in countries where abortion is illegal, abortion happens. And what's most important to me is to have an option for women who are going through this process for whatever. Maybe they can't support the baby, maybe if they were raped or whatever else it was, or the severe birth defects. I'm talking beyond like Down syndrome or any kind of genealogical defects, but severe birth defects where you know that the baby will not survive. I think it is massively important to have a safe and legal.
I think you have to then. George and I have talked about this here.
Yeah, but I think it's.
Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
Right. Well, I think it's let's keep in mind that when Bill Clinton raised that issue in 1992, he said three things about abortion. He said that it should be safe, legal, and rare. And that's very important. I mean, he put that in, and rare. And I think that the problem with many of the advocates for choice is that they forget the third criterion, and then they just say, well, it should be safe and legal. But the whole point is that there should be a culture within which abortion is discouraged. And I think that that part is.
But George, I just will say, for the aspect of rareness, I think that is a given. Nobody in their right mind plans to have an abortion in their lives.
Right, but it's not just a question of plan. I mean, basically, you should be going. The idea is that as rare as possible. In other words, it can never be as a kind of a form of birth control. I mean, that's I think what he was getting at. I mean,
if it's on demand, then you don't have to plan. That's a logical deduction.
But as an option of birth control, I think it's kind of a ridiculous proposal to propose abortion as ever being something that people would use as birth control, because it is so traumatic for a woman to have to go through that.
Oh, geez. I mean, we've seen. I mean, there was some very famous. I mean, I don't keep up with the celebrity stuff. Okay, it's a waste of time. But wasn't it only a few months ago? It was before the pandemic. I mean, there was this Hollywood type on one of these, afternoon shows, and she was, I'm most proud of my third abortion. You remember something like that? That was really. Yeah. I mean, that's for me. It's really horrific. And then you have Virginia's governor. Listening to a witness during some kind of committee meeting, and they were talking about, what do you do after the birth of a child? It's up to the doctor and the mother if the life can continue. I mean, when I heard that, that's horrifying. It's a live birth, and you're considering abortion? I mean, what George said, citing Clinton, I think they were thinking in terms of the first trimester, George, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think what Clinton was referring to was that we should maintain Roe versus Wade, that the Supreme Court shouldn't overturn it. I mean, I think it was in that context. He said there shouldn't be any attempt to overturn Roe v. Wade, but we have to maintain the sort of, it should be safe, legal, and rare. In other words, there should be a culture in which it's frowned upon. It's not just thought of, let's just one more thing, along with all the other forms of contraception. I think that's what he was saying, and I think that's the reasonable argument. Yeah.
Well, I'm also absolutely not arguing for it as a form of birth control whatsoever. I just think it should be available in limited form, but there for when women come and really need help and need to go through this process.
Well, I don't think we don't have an argument on that. Okay, like I am not for. I mean, first of all, Roe versus Wade should have never been judged by the Supreme Court. It should have never gone to the Supreme Court. It's a state's issue. It's nowhere inside the Constitution, that issue, or remotely to it. But we have it, okay? And I'm not for overturning it, okay? But I don't mind it being challenged, all right? Because it does throw it back to the states, okay? I just don't understand. I guess I have to be careful now. You have 5 men and 4 women now, or is it 5 and 3?
I think it's how many women? I think there are 3 women, isn't it? Sotomayor, Kagan, and Barrett. So three women.
Oh, so I don't see why 6 men and 3 women should be talking about these issues. I find it really disturbing. However, for the record, I am not for overturning it. Okay, Ciara, as a woman, I have to, as a man, respect you. I mean, that's something George and I will never face. Okay, so I'm not going to be categorical about it. I'm fundamentally against it, and when we get to this point where we're talking about a live birth and you're deciding what to do with it, that is a culture of death, okay? And we have to remember, at least in America, where abortion came from, it came from a eugenicist that wanted to destroy Black people. That was the origins of abortion in America, okay? That was a way to get rid of Black people, okay? And I think now there are more Black children that are aborted than are born in America. I'll have to look that up, but it's something really close. Okay, that's fundamentally wrong.
Mm-hmm. But I would also then argue that you'd have to pick into the reasons of why these children are being aborted.
Well, I mean, and that's why one of the reasons why we decided to do this podcast in the first place. I mean, it gets down to class, okay? When you give lack of resources for people to make good decisions about their life, either what kind of education, even the kind of food you eat, okay? Because if you're poor, you eat badly. If you eat badly, then you are in bad health, okay? Then it's difficult for you to get a job, okay? It goes back to class. And if we start caring about families, really caring about families, and not about GDP and the stock market, okay? If we thought about families, then the choice, the choice to have an abortion, I guarantee you, would go down, okay?
I agree with you, Peter, and I 100% agree that it's in dire circumstances that people turn to make such decisions. But just to swing back to Poland and away from the US for 1 second, I just wanted to say that I think it's a great thing that even during the warnings of pandemic, coronavirus, and obviously it's not kosher at all to have mass rallies of thousands of people protesting something in this current climate. I think obviously this issue is important enough to Polish citizens to make them.
Well, could you just tell us what does this new legislation say? What exactly is in this legislation?
Banning all form of abortion apart from in cases where it's been rape and incest.
So all any rape and incest.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But that's a legislative. It hasn't been adopted yet. Is it?
It hasn't been adopted yet, and I think there is room for change because obviously the backlash has been so fervent. But also, I would say that I also looking through this, it also turns the opinion on. There's a lot of people very angry at the church right now in Poland for this, and there's a lot of anger against the church, and the churches have been protected by these groups of the kind of football hooligan types of skinheads with pepper spray and whatever else. But there's just a lot of hate and kind of backlash against the church, which then the government has tried to take upon itself, being like, your hate should be at us, not at the church. But I think it shows that there's a big divide, Peter, I don't know if you agree, in Poland growing between the older generations and the younger generations of people. Again, also to do with LGBT issues. We all know that there's been this massive anti-LGBT movement and against LGBT ideology, as they call it. And I think it's causing a very deep trend in Polish society.
I mean, but I don't know, George maybe can speak about it with Hungary, and I have to be completely honest with our viewers. I haven't lived in Poland for a while, but my sense is because there is a disenchantment with this postmodernist ideology that Brussels and other EU institutions peddle all the time. People fall back on what is familiar. I mean, I've seen Polish nationalism, the ugly side of it, and it's very ugly. Okay, that doesn't mean I don't think their healthy patriotism isn't good. It's very, very good. Okay, but the whole issue of the church, because the how people look at the church now is through a postmodern lens, okay? And if that lens either is something you find abhorrent or you cling to it, is something that at least this is familiar to me, okay? Because postmodernism makes everybody, virtually everybody, unhappy. And I think that's where it's coming from here. Plus, you have to understand it, and George can speak about Hungary. The Poles had really high hopes for the EU, really high hopes, okay? And they're still at the kiddie table, okay? They're not with the big guys. They're not with Germany, not with France, not with Italy. They're at the kids' table, and it infuriates them.
Right, but I think also it is true that the communist world, and that includes Russia and all of Eastern Europe, I mean, communism kind of put a freeze on everything. So
yep.
They're actually something like 50 years behind
yep.
Sort of the advanced thinking of the West. And so in many ways, what's going on now in Poland and Hungary is in some ways a kind of the views that people used to hold in the West 50 years ago. Now it lost. That argument was lost in the West, so 50 years ago. But it's, we'll see what happens in Eastern Europe, because for instance in Hungary, they complain about books in schools that they claim are advocating homosexuality in schools. Now I remember living in the UK. In the 70s and 80s, and you had exactly the same argument. What the hell are these teachers doing in the schools teaching children about homosexuality? I mean, and so it's like a deja vu all over again. And now, as I say, that argument was lost in the West. So doesn't mean that it'll be lost in Eastern Europe and in Russia, but it's the same thing that was actually going on decades ago in the West.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, it's a disenchantment, okay? And as we go through this pandemic and now the Eurozone is in austerity mode again, and with not much hope in the nearest future here, people tend to fall back on these cultural issues here. I'm not surprised by it, but we're not going to resolve it in this. And we're already 17 minutes, 19 seconds into this here. That was just one thumbs down. George, you got a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
A thumbs up. A thumbs up. It was hard work, because I've got lots of thumbs downs, but it was hard work coming up with a thumbs up. Well, I find it very interesting that there are suddenly this spate of rap artists who are coming out in favor of Trump. Not that I have the slightest interest in these rap artists, or that I've even ever heard of them, or that I have any time for rap music, but I do think it's interesting that this man who has been condemned repeatedly as a racist, or, when are you going to denounce David Duke, when are you going to denounce the white supremacists and so on, is suddenly being embraced by these black rap stars. Yeah. And I think it's very healthy that there should be a shake-up in the political system. And that maybe, we've been waiting for this for a long time, and maybe this is the moment, maybe it isn't, when that black wall, which has always been 100% pretty much for the Democratic Party, is going to start to crumble. And they're suddenly thinking, well, what the hell's the Democratic Party done for us? And that doesn't mean the Republicans are going to do anything very much for them, but it means at least the political system is shaken up, and the Democrats can no longer just sit idly by and think, oh, well, we've got the minorities, we've got the blacks, we've got the Hispanics. All we need is a few suburban voters, and we're home.
George, what other ethnic group in the United States is treated in such a monolithic way? Hispanics are not. No way. Because there's even a category, white Hispanic, because there's been so many generations of Latinos, as they say, in the United States, that they feel like they're the mainstream. We're the mainstream. It's like by the 1940s, Irish, Italian, and Jews, they were the mainstream. They're actually the basis of the American middle class. Okay, so I mean, Asians, no. As a matter of fact, the median, I just read it a couple of minutes ago, the median wage of Asian women is higher than white men, okay? White men.
That's right, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And look at these other groups here. Okay, and particularly like look at Hispanics. You know, I mean, there are Cubans, there are Mexicans, there's people from El Salvador. I mean, half of El Salvador is in America right now. Okay,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and then there are people from the Caribbean. But when you look at blacks, the liberals have such an inherently racist attitudes by them because we'll take care of you. I mean, it's like a plantation mentality. Okay.
Yeah.
They're so blinded by their ideology and what they think racism is that it's intensely racist to treat people that way. You're all the same, right? That is amazing. After what
I think that's right.
Civil rights.
And what it's showing, particularly with these rap stars, is that identity politics is more for white people. I mean, the white liberals, they're the ones who embrace it. It doesn't look like blacks particularly like this identity politics. And so, they don't like it. They want to talk about economic issues. Now, it's true that these are very rich people, and there's a self-interest involved, which is, hey, I don't want the government coming along and taxing my millions. And that always happens, that when people suddenly get rich, they become conservative because they don't want the government coming after their money. But that's only part of it. It goes deeper than that. I think that they really are sick of liberals, and they're sick to death of the Democratic Party. I think that's a significant development.
There's this guy named 50 Cent again. I'm too old. No, I don't know these things. But he really didn't want to be known as Mr. 20 Cent.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, that was a good line.
I wanted to ask you guys if you've ever heard any rap from Lil Wayne, 50 Cent, or Ice Cube.
No, I can't say I have. No. I said I have no idea, and I don't want to listen to this. But
no, I mean the thing is that that there's this Candace Owens, a really remarkable young woman and amazingly articulate, and I'm really glad that she's got a footing because she's speaking as an individual. She's not speaking for black people. She's speaking for herself. I mean, everybody else in America can speak for themselves except for black people, apparently. Okay, so I think it's a breath of fresh air. Everyone should be able to decide for themselves, and people get dumped on for what was this? I guess it was the ex-girlfriend or wife of this 50 Cent guy, and she said, "I had to remind him he's black."
That's it.
What?
Yes, a white woman.
He's black.
A white woman tells a black man that he's black. Can you imagine the insolence of that? I mean, it's kind of breathtaking. And it was the same, that guy, Leo, I forgot his name. Leo was always on Sean Hannity. And he heard that line. Leo Terrell. And when he heard that line from Biden, if you're not for Biden, you ain't black. And he said, well, I'm black and I'm not for Biden. That's it. Simple answer.
Yeah. Well, I also agree with you, Peter, that you should be treated individually and all opinions count, not just the right opinion. So I do not agree with the backlash that comes from someone coming out in support of a camp that is not popular with the rest of your peers, because you should be able to say what your opinion is without fearing that it's going to, fearing that you're saying something wrong.
You can do the correlation if you want, okay? But I look at it this way. The Great Society, Lyndon Baines Johnson's idea of a great society that, and it came from him being the first job he ever had he was a school teacher. And he saw all of these poor kids, primarily black kids. They would go to school because they wanted to go to school because that's where they would get breakfast, okay? Because they were hungry, okay? The poverty of rural Texas was ungodly, okay? Awful, okay? And to wanting to wipe out poverty, that was a good thing. But what happened was the outcome was unexpected, or maybe it could have been expected, is that you ended up having fatherless families. Okay, you in the 1950s, and no one hold me to the numbers here. I'm going to give some rough numbers here. It was something like 80% of blacks were born within wedlock, and now it's like in the teens. Okay,
right. Well,
because this is creating dependency, and so again,
there was also the problem, which is with the Great Society, is that they were funneling money into what they called local communities. Now, what happened in these local communities were often, they were often just gangsters, And so basically just gangsters were getting federal money. And so you had all these big city mayors coming to the White House and telling Lyndon Johnson, do you actually have any understanding what's going on in our cities? Because there's actually federal money, and yet there's really no control as to where this federal money is going. And so it's not actually funding the community, it's actually going into the hands of gangsters. And it was causing a great deal of problems in the inner cities. So, I mean, the idea was good, but it was a misconceived, and which is why Lyndon Johnson and the Democrats were just simply swept aside. It was like huge defeat in 1968. I mean, when you consider the Nixon and Wallace vote together, that was a massive, massive rejection.
I mean, also with these SARS coming out, it does kind of take a kind of a hatchet job to this ridiculous statement of systemic racism. Okay, I mean, they have done well. They're proud of what their individual achievement. The Great Society didn't make Mr. 50 Cent. Okay, he made himself. Okay, Larry Elder made himself a great conservative, a black conservative in America, and they're constantly talking about this. So I am really glad that this is being talked about, because and Ciara, you know as well as anyone, I'm for the realignment. Okay, I'm for the realignment. I want hardworking, middle-class people of all colors and all faiths. That's the voting bloc. That's the voting bloc of the future. Okay, to break out of this serfdom that they have created. Okay, and it's the Democrats that play the race card every single time. And I don't want to mimic Donald Trump here, but if you look at these cities all across America, they're run by Democrats. A lot of them are run by black mayors and black police officers. And you're telling me that there's systemic racism? No, it's an opportunity gap. Okay, that's what we have going on right now. I truly believe all boats can rise. Okay, and playing this divide and conquer has to come to an end. It's just destroying the country. Okay, and as George said, all these people that pound their chest, we have to fight racism. There are white liberal women in the suburbs. Okay, and if a Black Lives Matter march comes near their house, they're going to call the police or their private security. Okay, this virtue signaling is just god awful. All right, my turn. What's my thumb up? Yep. Thumbs up. Tucker Carlson and Anthony Bobulinski. At the beginning of the week, two men with great courage, because Bobulinski's life is over as he knows it. Okay, and Tucker just keeps showing that you don't have to be afraid. Okay, of course he has a good position. I mean, he is by far. No one can touch him in the popularity of his program. I mean, that's what gives him insulation. Okay, Fox News is not going to get rid of their most popular personality. I mean, and he's really moving further and further ahead of Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity. I mean, someone like Rachel Maddow is in the rearview mirror. Okay, so but Anthony Bobulinski George and I did a video on this, and I said he's like a real American. I mean, this guy he's legit. Okay, so I give a thumbs up to both of them. Of course, it's in reference to the growing scandal around the Biden family, and I think it's just so abhorrent. It's so unconscionable that you can find very little information about this. Okay, this is such an assault on freedom of expression. It's such an assault. I mean, on Crosstalk, with George will be a guest, and we're going to talk about election interference. Well, it's just such an illusion. Okay, it's like talking to flat earthers. Okay, but
right. That's right, exactly, because what you now have is journalists explicitly stating that we are not going to cover this story because it interferes with our political preference. And that's what Christiane Amanpour did in that little segment. It says, well, we're not going to do your work for you, she says to this Republican spokeswoman. But yes, you should be doing your own work. Your own work is to ascertain what's going on here. These are very serious charges. There's massive documentary evidence for this. So, it's up to you to determine, does this stand up or doesn't stand up? Don't just say, well, we're not even going to look at it.
Well, there was documentary evidence in Russiagate. It was called the Steele Dossier.
Exactly.
The fantasy of a group of people that pulled the biggest fraud on the political establishment in history. Okay, so yeah, I mean, what we need to do is, we need to, and I want our viewers to know is that, George and I have talked a lot about this, but we have been very, very careful in our words and been very, very measured and only talk about what is knowable, okay? Because I want to be responsible. This whole conspiracy model will replicate itself in the future, and I really worry about that. We really need to get this poison out of our body politic. Okay, that's been there was 2 thumbs up and 1 thumbs down. Okay.
2 thumbs up, 1 thumbs down.
All right. Anything else?
Yes, I've got a few thumbs downs. Well, first of all, the news that just came over in the last hour, the death of Sean Connery. Clearly,
I won.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which is really sad, particularly those of us in an older generation. A couple of thumbs down. Jeremy Corbyn's suspension from the Labour Party, a ridiculous, absolutely nonsensical thing. I mean, the whole notion that Jeremy Corbyn is somehow anti-Semitic has always been so laughable. I mean, this is a man who lives, breathes, eats anti-racism and anti-Semitism. The idea of accusing him of any kind of bigotry is just pathetic, and it's very sad that it's actually come to this, that the new leader of the Labour Party suspends from membership somebody with whom he had been working for several years in the shadow cabinet. So that's pathetic. Then also, again, I had this guy, the small one, the student government at the University of Wisconsin-Madison has voted to remove the statue of Abraham Lincoln from its campus because Lincoln was you guessed it, a white supremacist. So, yes, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, but that doesn't mean he was pro-black. He was still a white supremacist. So that's his statue that will disappear from the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And then I got another one, which is this creature, Miles Taylor, who made a cool million on the notion that he was anonymous and there's some very senior figure within the Trump administration, maybe Mike Pence, maybe Ivanka, maybe Melania,
maybe
something really senior. And of course, the New York Times also creepily put that suggestion about. Turns out he was a pretty low-level official who instead of resigning because he doesn't like the policies that he supposedly so hated, carried on collecting his government salary and implementing a program that he apparently utterly despised. And now he's going around giving interviews claiming that Trump's immigration policy is Nazi-like. Itself completely idiotic because
he's a CNN contributor now.
Exactly. So he's making having made all that money on his book Anonymous, he's now also making a nice bundle as a CNN contributor. And again, idiotic pronouncements like Trump's immigration policy is Nazi-like. Obviously, he knows nothing about Nazis or anything else, but he knows how to get rich.
Well, I have a thumbs up to the courage of Glenn Greenwald for leaving The Intercept, finally, because The Intercept had turned into such a rag, and now it's going to be a complete rag, and my prediction, within the year, it'll be gone, okay? The only thing that kept it going was Glenn.
I feel like he had a great choice.
Mm-hmm. Great.
But I'll give you 1 thumbs up from me, maybe a thumbs up, which is some of the work that Pope Francis has been doing, such as fighting corruption in the Vatican. I feel like he's creating kind of a fresh breath for the culture of the Vatican and what goes on there, as it's been years of scandals now, scandal after scandal. So I feel like I want to give a thumbs up to him for his, again, rhetoric, which is that he is not afraid, like a lot of these people coming out to say things that are not the usual kind of story or narrative that you'll hear, saying I'm not afraid, and that he's keen to fight corruption in the Vatican. And you can see that with the ousting of a cardinal over embezzlement accusations, and he was a very close advisor. So
You know, it's been my experience, and I've lived most of my entire life abroad, and I've traveled around Europe so much, and I've always lamented the state of the church because there are so many scandals. And Ciara, you and I have talked about particular scandals that really just turned people. It turned me away. It turned me away. I can't be around an institution that would tolerate the abuse of children, and coming clean on that's really, really important. You really have to have an exorcism of sorts for a lot of people to reconsider their position, because a lot of us were brought up culturally Catholic. Okay, I mean, I have an automatic affinity with the church because of the way I was brought up, but because of the things that have happened that I've become aware of in my life, it's just too painful. You and I have had long conversations about that. And I'm an American and you're Irish, and it's the same story, unfortunately. So if Pope Francis can, if that could be his legacy, that would be really great. That would be really great. Because this is a time when so many people need faith, because you guys might know my mantra, this postmodernism, it just creates a void that doesn't create any nurturement. There's no nurture in postmodernism. And this is why we have so many social problems. The drug epidemic in the United States is unparalleled. More people die of overdoses than soldiers died in the entire Vietnam War, American soldiers. That's just for 1 year, okay? If they started thinking in terms of body bags, okay, to start creating an image for people, how many body bags this opiate epidemic has created, okay? And obviously that's part of an economic issue, but it's also a void issue, people wanting to run away from pain and emptiness, okay? And these are issues we should address, okay? It should be, okay? And just don't blame China, okay? That's going to be the new one. All right, anything else for anybody?
Well, one other thumbs down. I mean, it's a continuation of what we talked about last week, which is now more and more governors are coming out against implementing the vaccine program. Why? Because it's Donald Trump's vaccine. So Governor Gavin Newsom and Governor Andrew Cuomo are not going to distribute the vaccine because it's coming from Trump. Leave aside the fact that if the vaccine becomes available on the market, scientists will have signed off on it. I mean, it's not Trump who's going to say, yeah, I like this vaccine, so let's hand it out. It's actually going to be scientists, presumed qualified scientists, who will actually say this is safe. Now, if you're going to be on principle against vaccines and say, you're against them, fine, then make that argument. But don't say I'm against it because it's Donald Trump's vaccine. I mean, that just seems utterly childish and irresponsible.
That's exactly what it is here. It's Trump derangement syndrome, and there's no cure for it, okay? Maybe long-term isolation or something like that, okay? Actually, I was just thinking, Prince Andrew, he's probably an expert in self-isolation. Maybe he should write a book of self-help, how to live with yourself alone. It'd be a bestseller, okay? Did you notice that it was a few months ago, someone, I don't know, maybe his niece or nephew got married, and they had the official picture of the couple, and then they had a photographer give the unofficial one. He's like 20 feet away, standing all by himself. They wouldn't let him in the official picture, okay? But he was there in the background on the margins, okay? I don't feel sorry for him. He made his own bed. Now make him sleep in it, okay? That's how I feel. All right. All right.
Oh, before we go, though, I want to say happy Halloween.
What's Halloween?
Happy Halloween.
Halloween, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I hate that. I wish it just stays in America. It comes here, too. Anyway, just another commercial thing. All righty. Okay, I hope everyone liked this. I hope our viewers enjoyed it. And if you did, like, share, and subscribe. And next week, we'll have the next thumbs up, thumbs down from the Gaggle. Stay tuned.